The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it seeps. It finds the microscopic cracks in the weather stripping of a 1998 Ford Taurus and settles deep into the upholstery, making everything smell like wet wool and despair. Liam Caldwell was 18 years old, and this car was his entire world. For 6 months since the state foster system unceremoniously aged him out on his birthday, Liam had lived in the back seat. His nights were governed by a hyper-vigilant terror listening for the crunch of gravel that meant a security guard or police officer was coming to tell him to move along. He brushed his teeth in gas station bathrooms and worked off the book's shifts, washing dishes at a diner managed by a sympathetic cook named Greg. Liam had no family, no safety net, and no future that he could see past the frost forming on his windshield. Then came the Tuesday that changed the trajectory of his existence. Liam maintained a cheap P.O. box downtown, the only fixed address he could afford, hoping against hope that one of the dozens of job applications he'd filled out at the public library would yield a reply. Instead, sitting in the narrow metal slot was a heavy cream-colored envelope bearing the embossed seal of Sterling & Associates, attorneys at law. Aldrich Sterling sat behind a desk carved from a single slab of polished walnut. He was a man who looked like he had never known the feeling of damp socks or an empty stomach. Liam sat opposite him, acutely aware of the grease stains on his worn denim jacket. "Your father, David Caldwell, passed away when you were very young, Liam. I understand you were put into the system shortly after, Mr. Sterling began, his voice practiced and smooth. "What you did not know, and what your father kept hidden, was that his father, your grandfather, Silas Caldwell, was still alive until 3 weeks ago." Liam felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. A grandfather? While he was bouncing between abusive group homes and sleeping in a freezing car, there had been blood family out there. Silas was an eccentric man, Sterling continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. He was estranged from your father. However, Silas died without a revised will. As his only surviving blood relative, you were the sole heir to his estate. For a split second, Liam envisioned a warm bed, a refrigerator humming with food, maybe even a college fund. Sterling slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside was a single photograph of a dilapidated, sagging farmhouse surrounded by rows of dead, skeletal trees. Silas owned 60 acres of agricultural land in the Yakima Valley. It was once a functioning apple orchard, Sterling said, his tone turning apologetic. I must be honest with you, Liam. The property has been abandoned for over a decade. The taxes are barely paid up through a small trust that has now run dry. The farmhouse is unlivable. The soil, well, the local county reports suggest the land is barren, but by law, the deed is yours. Liam stared at the photograph. It wasn't a salvation. It was a graveyard of dead wood. But as he walked out into the Seattle drizzle, jingling his car keys, a strange, defiant thought took root in his mind. It might be dead dirt, but it's my dead dirt. 2 days later, the Ford Taurus sputtered down a cracked dirt road off Highway 97, deep in Washington State's agricultural heartland. The landscape was vast and unforgiving. When Liam finally pulled up to the coordinates Sterling had provided, his heart sank. The photograph hadn't captured the sheer scale of the ruin. Thousands of apple trees stood like twisted, arthritic fingers clawing at the gray sky. The farmhouse roof had partially caved in and the porch was rotted through. Weeds choked the ground, thick and thorny. Liam spent his first week sleeping in his car parked next to the ruined house. By day, he used a rusted machete he found in a collapsed shed to clear the brush. He didn't know anything about farming, but the physical labor was a distraction from the overwhelming loneliness. On his 5th day, a pickup truck rattled up the driveway. A woman in her late 60s, with a face lined by decades of harsh sun and kind smiles, stepped out. She carried a steaming Tupperware container. "You must be the Caldwell boy," she said, handing him the container. It was beef stew. "I'm Clara Jenkins. My property borders yours, to the south." We all heard Silas's grandson was coming. Liam took the food, his hands shaking slightly from hunger. "Thank you, ma'am. Did you know him?" "Silas?" Clara's expression darkened. "I knew him. We all did. Silas was a brilliant botanist, but he went a bit mad toward the end. He claimed the big corporate farms were trying to poison his water table to force him to sell. Most folks thought it was paranoia. She gestured to the dead trees. Then, his orchard died overnight. Blight, the county agricultural inspector said. But Silas swore it was sabotage. Clara leaned in closer, lowering her voice. A company called Agri Global, run by a man named Peter Gable, bought up all the foreclosed farms around here. Gable wanted this plot to connect his northern and southern logistics routes. Silas refused to sell. A week later, the trees died. A month after that, Silas vanished into a nursing home, refusing to speak to anyone. The warning gnawed at Liam. He was an 18-year-old kid with $20 to his name. He couldn't fight a corporate giant like Agri Global. He decided he would clear enough land to make the property presentable, sell it for whatever pennies he could get, and move on. The next morning, Liam set to work on a massive, dead tree stump near the center of the property. It was thicker than the rest, its roots dug into the earth like iron cables. For 6 hours, he hacked, sawed, and dug with a rusty shovel. His hands were blistered and bleeding, the physical pain a welcome release from the emotional weight of his life. Claim. The shovel hit something hard, not a rock. The sound was distinct, a hollow, metallic ring. Liam dropped to his knees, clawing away the frozen, damp earth with his bare hands. 2 feet down, wedged beneath the thickest taproot, was a heavy military-grade steel lockbox. The padlock was rusted shut, but a few heavy blows from the blunt edge of his machete shattered the decaying shackle. He pulled the box from the dirt, sitting cross-legged in the mud, his breath pluming in the cold air. He pried the lid open. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of thick waterproof oilcloth, were 3 leather-bound journals and 6 large glass mason jars. The jars were vacuum-sealed with wax. Inside them were thousands of tiny dark seeds. Liam opened the first journal. The pages were filled with meticulous, cramped handwriting, alongside intricate sketches of root systems, grafting techniques, and soil chemistry equations. October 14, 2011. They think I am crazy. Gable thinks he has won. He poisoned groundwater with a synthetic herbicide variant, untraceable to standard county tests, but I found the chemical signature. My trees are dying, but they do not know what I have achieved in the greenhouse. November 2, 2011, the Crimson Frost strain is stable. I have bred an apple tree that is not only resistant to the sub-zero snaps of the valley, but the rootstock is entirely immune to the synthetic toxins Gable is pumping into the aquifer. It filters the heavy metals. It thrives on it. It is a biological miracle. November 18, 2011, Gable's men broke into my lab last night. They burned my notes, but they didn't find the seeds. I am burying the sole surviving seeds at the Crimson Frost beneath the old sentinel tree. If anything happens to me, whoever finds this, do not sell to Gable. These seeds are the patent that will ruin him. Liam sat in the dirt, the journal trembling in his hands. Silas wasn't a crazy old man. He was a visionary who had been robbed of his life's work. And he had left the weapon for his revenge buried in the dirt for his estranged bloodline to find. Liam didn't know the first thing about germinating an heirloom, chemically resistant apple seed, but he knew Clara Jenkins might. He showed Clara the journals. She read them in silence at her kitchen table, tears welling in her eyes. He wasn't crazy, she whispered. My God, Silas. Clara connected Liam with a retired university botanist living in the next town over, Dr. Eris Kensington. Dr. Kensington was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had spent his life studying agricultural genetics. When he saw Silas' notes, his jaw dropped. If this is real, Liam, Dr. Kensington said, adjusting his spectacles, your grandfather solved an agricultural vulnerability the companies have spent billions trying to crack. If we can germinate these, you hold the biological patent to a multi-million-dollar rootstock. They moved the seeds to Dr. Kensington's secure, climate-controlled greenhouse. But the secret didn't stay hidden for long. Small towns talk. A week later, a sleek black SUV pulled up to Liam's ruined farmhouse. Liam was patching a hole in the porch when a man stepped out. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that looked absurd against the backdrop of the dead orchard. Liam Caldwell, I presume, the man said, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Peter Gable. I own AgriGlobal. Liam gripped his hammer tightly. I know who you are. Straight to the point, I like that, Gable said, walking closer, surveying the rot. This is no place for a young man. You've had a rough life, Liam. The foster system is cruel. I'm here to offer you an out. I will write you a check today for $200,000 for the deed to this land. You can buy a house, go to college, start fresh. $200,000. To a kid sleeping in a Ford Taurus, it was a lottery win. It was salvation. But Liam looked down at the dirt. His grandfather's dirt. I know about the water, Gable, Liam said, his voice steady. I know what you did to Silas. And I know the soil here isn't dead. It's just waiting. Gable's smile vanished. His eyes turned cold, calculating. You're a homeless kid playing a game you don't understand. Accidents happen out here in the valley. Liam. Fires start. People disappear. Take the money. Get off my property, Liam said. Gable stared at him for a long moment, then turned and got into his SUV. You'll regret this, boy. The intimidation escalated. Over the next month, Liam found the tires of his Taurus slashed. Dead animals were thrown onto his porch. But Liam, hardened by years on the streets, didn't break. He slept with a baseball bat and a borrowed shotgun from Clara. Meanwhile, in Dr. Kensington's greenhouse, a miracle was happening. Out of the thousands of seeds, a few hundred had sprouted. They grew with a fierce, unnatural vitality. The leaves were a deep, vibrant green with veins of striking crimson. Dr. Kensington ran chemical tests on the sprouts. Silas was right, the doctor said, holding up a vial of water. I introduced Gable's herbicide into the soil of these saplings. Not only did they survive, they metabolized it. They are completely immune. They were ready to be planted. Liam, Clara, and Dr. Kensington spent 3 exhausting days planting the saplings in the exact grid Silas had mapped out in his journals. But Gable wasn't finished. On a moonless night in late April, Liam woke to the smell of smoke. He grabbed the shotgun and ran outside. A figure in a dark hoodie was pouring gasoline along the perimeter of the newly planted saplings, holding a flare. Liam racked the shotgun. The deafening clack-clack echoed in the still night. Drop it! Liam roared. The figure froze, then dropped the flare into the dirt inches from the gasoline line and bolted into the darkness. Liam rushed forward, violently kicking dirt over the burning flare, extinguishing it before it could ignite the fuel. He stood there, panting, smelling the toxic fumes of gasoline on his grandfather's land. He didn't chase the man. He didn't have to. Before planting, Liam had used the last of his dishwashing savings to buy 3 high-definition trail cameras. He had mounted them in the dead canopy of the old trees. The next morning, Liam sat in the local police precinct with Officer David Miller. They watched the footage on a laptop. The infrared camera clearly captured the arsonist pulling down his hood to wipe sweat from his brow. It wasn't a hired thug. It was Peter Gable. Driven by arrogance and a desperate need to silence Silas's legacy, he had come to do the job himself. The arrest of Peter Gable sent shockwaves through the agricultural community. A subsequent EPA investigation, triggered by Silas' detailed journals and Dr. Kensington's testimony, uncovered the massive illegal chemical dumping AgriGlobal had engaged in for over a decade. The corporation was dismantled, hit with billions in fines, and Gable was sentenced to federal prison. As for Liam Caldwell, his life shifted in ways he could never have imagined from the backseat of his Ford Taurus. The Crimson Frost saplings thrived. By the time Liam turned 21, the orchard was alive again, but he didn't become an apple farmer. Recognizing the immense global value of what his grandfather had created, Liam, guided by Dr. Kensington and Aldrich Sterling, licensed the genetic rights of the Crimson Frost to an international environmental agricultural consortium. The deal made Liam a multi-millionaire. He rebuilt the old farmhouse, preserving the original stone fireplace where his grandfather used to sit. He kept his 1998 Ford Taurus, parking it in a pristine, climate-controlled garage as a daily reminder of where he came from. He established a foundation for youth aging out of the foster care system, ensuring kids like him had housing and education. One crisp autumn morning, Liam walked through the rows of mature trees. The branches were heavy with apples deep red, almost black, covered in a natural silvery frost. He reached up, plucked one, and took a bite. It was crisp, sweet, and perfectly resilient. He looked down at the soil, the dirt that everyone told him was poisoned, dead, and worthless. He smiled, knowing that sometimes the things that are thrown away and abandoned are exactly the things that end up saving the world.